Chevre, how are you? I hope everyone is gesund, stark, und freilich, begashmis und beruchnis. I hope everyone is healthy, strong, and happy physically and spiritually. Since the war started, we added Stocker, daily Stocker, Shemakarev, Segula. Mashiach should come now. In Yitzhak Hashem, by the next time we speak, all the hostages will have returned home, etc., etc. And the main bracha is Mashiach now. We'll say a prayer which is connected to the theme of what we're going to speak about today, and that is Hareini Mekabel Alai Mitzvah Sasei Shel V'Ahavta L'Reacha Kamecha. I take upon myself to fulfill the mitzvah of loving my fellow Yid as myself. You know, in the world, by Chabad, we don't use such a language. We speak about achlotes, but in the world, they speak about taking on a Kabbalah. A Kabbalah means a resolution, something you accept upon yourself, a new resolution, an improvement. So I think that in a certain sense, if you want to take a Kabbalah, here you have the most immediate, the most important Kabbalah, Hareini Mekabel Alai Mitzvah Sasei Shel V'Ahavta L'Reacha Kamecha. So today it's Erev Shabbos Kodesh, and it's Chalamay Tzukis, and we're learning the Pasha Shavua of HaBeracha, which we learn on Simchas Torah. So today we're going to speak about the connection of Pashas HaBeracha and Simchas Torah. Now, even though Simchas Torah is next week, but mitzad Sibas Shainas technical reasons, we're going to make the video right now. Today I'm going to Chazer a Sikha, which, in my humble opinion, is the most astonishing Sikhas of all of the Rebbe's Sikhas. I'll tell you a story that happened with me many years ago. This is a Sikha in Chelik Chov Daled Beracha. Many years ago, it was a Shabbos afternoon, and I was going to give a shiur about Moshe and Aaron. And I had a question. We're not going to get into it now. And the question was, why is the Anania Kovid connected to Aaron? That was my question. And it was a contradiction, and I had an answer based on another mimer, another Hasidic discourse. And I decided late afternoon Shabbos, I'm going to rush home and check out one more Sikha that talks about Moshe and Aaron, because I'd seen already most of them. And the one Sikha that I hadn't seen about the subject of Moshe and Aaron and each one's roles was a Sikha in Chelik Chov Daled Beracha. I go to my Svarim Shaf, I pull out the Sefer, and I sit down and I start reading the Sefer, and I'm feeling vibrations, revelation, and I'm getting so excited, and I decided, forget my whole shiur that I prepared for a couple of hours, I'm just going to repeat this Sikha. It's so amazing, it's so important. And this is what you call, on the subject, which is going to be Ahavas Yisrael, the last word. Case closed. And that is a Sikha in Parshas HaBeracha, where the Rebbe says as follows, on the pasuk where it says that Moshe Rabbeinu passes away, it says that, first it says Moshe was 120 years old, and his eyes did not weaken, nor did the freshness of his skin disappear. So we're speaking about how he's awesome and he's different and he's special. And then it says, Vayivku b'nei Yisrael es Moshe, the children of Israel, of Yisrael, wept for Moshe. Shleishim Yom, and then the days of weeping ended. So when he passed away, it says, the children of Yisrael wept for Moshe. Rashi says, B'nei Yisrael, the children of Yisrael, Hascharim, the males. Aval ba'Aaron, but by Aaron, mitoich shahoya reidav shalom v'neisen shalom, ben ish l'reu, ben ish l'bayla. But regarding Aaron, since he pursued peace and made peace between man and his fellow man, and between wife and husband, it says, Kol Beis Yisrael, all of the house of Israel, the entire nation, Schorim Munakevis, males and females. So the Rebbe asks, Mamish a klotz kasha. you'd think that in the day of Moshe Rabbeinu's passing, we're only going to speak about the mile of Moshe Rabbeinu. When any person passes on the day of the passing, we're only going to speak about his qualities. What does Rashi do over here? According to Rashi's Pshat, there's another Pshat, but I don't want to get into it now. The time is very late. According to Rashi's Pshat, we're bringing out a chesaron, a flaw, so to speak, that by Moshe Rabbeinu, when Moshe Rabbeinu passed away, only the males mourned, but not the females. But Aaron, it seems to be, was greater, that when he passed away, even the females mourned, the entire nation. And why? Because he brought peace between wife and husband. And he pursued peace. So the Torah should record and make note of a flaw in Moshe Rabbeinu's character, that in a certain sense, since he wasn't a person like Aaron who pursued peace, less people mourned him. How could the Torah say this on his day of passing? Especially that the Torah mentioned already before in Parshas Chukas, where it speaks about when Aaron passed away, Rashi over there brings down also the limud, how we know already this, that when Aaron passed away, all of the Yidden mourned. And the question is also, what's the point? Why is the Torah telling this over here? Okay, first of all, how could the Torah say it? It's a chesaron of Moshe Rabbeinu. But also, what's the message over here? We got the message already before, that all of the Yidden mourned Aaron. And why would it say over here, and Moshe Rabbeinu was writing this himself, a chesaron about himself? And the question is, we also know that Moshe Rabbeinu oiv Yisrael here. Moshe Rabbeinu was also someone who had unbelievable Avos Yisrael, and Avos Yisrael that you can't imagine, and Avos Yisrael of a leader, and there's countless stories of that. First of all, there's the famous story when the Yidden did the Chet HaEgel, and he said, Mecheni no misifrecha, that if Hashem doesn't forgive the Yidden, you should just erase my name from the Torah. Which that's the ultimate story of Avos Yisrael, as explained in many places in Chesed and in the Rebbe's talks. There's also, in this week's Parsha, where the Moshe Rabbeinu smashes the Luchas Leini Kol Yisrael at the end of the Parsha, which the Rebbe explains, and it's also explained in many places that this was the ultimate Avos Yisrael. How Moshe Rabbeinu smashes the Luchas, which is the work of Hashem himself, which you'd think, whoa, where does Moshe get the chutzpah to smash the Luchas? If we say, concerning Moshe himself, that Maisi Dei Moshe Nitzchim, what Moshe does is eternal, the handiwork of Moshe is eternal, how does he take the handiwork of the Eibush himself, the Luchas that come from another world, Hashem's writing itself and Hashem's work himself, and he smashes it? And one of the reasons why he smashed it was because the Luchas is like a stark suba, it was like the agreement, the covenant between the husband and wife, and the reason why he smashed it was to take away the eschayvus. If there's no contract, you ripped up the contract, so therefore they're not so guilty of what they did by serving the Chet HaEgel. That's one explanation, but in any case, according to all explanations, his smashing of the Luchas was something to save the Jewish people, etc., etc. So you see again his Avos Yisrael, even though, and the Eibishter says, Yashakoich Sheshibarta, thank you that he brought the Luchas, which means that he didn't know before, necessarily, if Hashem would agree with it, but he didn't think twice, so to speak. To save the Yidden, smash the Luchas. What's more important, the Luchas, the work of God himself, or the Jewish nation? The Jewish nation. I'm not getting into all the explanations right now, this is just to bring out a point, that Moshe Rabbeinu himself is seen as the ultimate of Yisrael. And the same thing concerning Torah, there's the famous Lashon, that Moshe Rabbeinu was Noeg B'Tov Ayin. He shared the Torah that Hashem gave him with all the Yidden, and he constantly taught and taught and taught. So we see again and again how by Moshe Rabbeinu we emphasize Avos Yisrael. So what does it mean over here? That we're seeming to imply that Aaron is Oyev Shalom V'Reid Shalom, and brings peace between Ish L'Ishtay, and that means to imply that there might be some deficiency in Moshe Rabbeinu's Avos Yisrael, when his Avos Yisrael is the ultimate l'chayra. So the Rebbe explains that this goes, and also we can ask, why wasn't Moshe doing that practice of Ohev Shalom v'Reiv Shalom? And the answer the Rebbe explains is that each one acts according to what their role is. Moshe Rabbeinu's dargah is emes, truth, and Aaron's level is Chesed. And by the way, the Rebbe discusses this in many Simchas, but he doesn't bring out the point that he brings in the Sikh in Cheluk Chav Dalet. So when it comes to Chesed, as it's explained in Mamar Azal, in the Gemara in Yevomis, that mutalei la'adam l'shanes b'davar hashalem. When it comes to peace, you're allowed to alter, change, in order to bring peace. Now, the Rebbe explains it doesn't mean you outright lies, but it means to change, which means to put a positive slant in it. And as the story goes, famous stories, let's say two people were in a fight, or a husband and wife, so you'd go over to one side and say, you don't understand how much the other side regrets whatever they did wrong, and they really want to get together again with you, even though that side never said it. But it'd go to the other side and say that person said that they really regretted any mistakes they made, and they miss you, and they want to get together, etc. And then they go to the other side and say the same thing. That the other side said they're missing you, and they made a mistake, and they want to get together, etc. Now, even though neither side had really said those things, but Aaron perceived what they really want in the end is to have peace, because in the end everybody wants to make peace. And Seif Maisa Maral Tchilosei, that he brought peace between the husband and wife, so he didn't let whatever differences was between them to be permanent, but on the contrary, he fixed the situation, he healed the situation, and he brought them together again. But how he did it was by selling it and convincing each party, even though it wasn't technically 100% true. And that's what it means, mutal l'shanis, mutal l'adam l'shanis b'davar hashalom, that in order for peace, you could, I don't know the right word in English, but it means, to translate, you could change, it means to change the truth a bit, that it's not technically dry truth, but if that will bring peace, you could do it. So the point is that that's Aaron's level, but not Moshe's level. So even though Moshe Rabbeinu was 100% in Ohev Yisrael, and he had Avos Yisrael, but there's one case, one instance, when it comes to such a situation, we have to change or alter the truth. So if you represent ultimate truth, that's your personality, that's your essence. So the man of truth, Moshe Rabbeinu's level, cannot tolerate, and it'll be against his role to change it or alter the idea of truth in any way whatsoever, even to being priest. See the Sikha there where the Rebbe gets into it, that even though Moshe is Torah and Torah says it's mutal l'shanis, but still since Moshe is emes, so his madrega represents and stands for emes, and this has to be as long as he's alive and that's his mission, etc. But the final point that the Rebbe says, and this is what I mean to say, that only the Rebbe could say it, and I think I might read to you inside some of the words, is as follows. What's the reason why the Torah tells this over here today, on the day that Moshe Rabbeinu is passing? And we're bringing out the Maila of Aaron, is because Moshe Rabbeinu is giving us this message. Hello, today, in the greatest day of my life, the Yoyim Estalkus. Estalkus means when the tzaddik has an aliyah, he becomes elevated. As the Pasuk discusses in the beginning, as the Chumash discusses in the beginning, as Moshe is about to pass away, it says, Vayal Moshe. He elevated, he ascended. So he ascended onto the mountain when he passed away, he ascended. He reached the highest level that he ever reached in his life. And the day that he reached the highest level in his life, he comes along to inform us, and he says, Aaron's way is the better way. And that's why he writes himself on the day that he passes away, that when I passed away, only the males mourn me, because I didn't act in the way of Aaron, which is the greater way and the better way. Truth be told, I can't understand it myself. But this is what the Rebbe says in the Sikha. Only the Rebbe could say such words. And if you don't believe me, look it up yourself. The Rebbe is saying that Vayal Moshe, what constitutes the ultimate ascending and elevation of Moshe Rabbeinu, that he comes to the awareness and the consciousness that Aaron's way is the better way. Not MS, but Chesed. Even though Moshe Rabbeinu is Nasi D'Reinu, how could there be something which is higher and greater? Oh, but Azeh is the Inyan. This is what the Rebbe says in Lekutei Sichos, Chel Chav Dalet. And I'll read you some of the words that he says over here. Similar to that it says, Vayal Moshe, that he went to Hanavoy. Hanavoy means he reached the 50th level, Nun Shari Bina. That means he reached a level of spiritual maturity and intimacy and awareness and knowledge that he never had before. Part of that was that he realized that the way of Aaron is the higher way. I'm just going to read. When Moshe was alive, until the last day of his life, Moshe was limited according to his level, which is MS. But when Moshe Rabbeinu reached the level of Vayal, he ascended even higher. He ascended to his highest level. He went out of his own limitations of his personality, his character, his level. As an avoid is nit begrenzt afilo nit mitivay begdusha midas ha'emes, that his service is not only limited anymore by this nature of holiness, which is the attribute of truth, but also more than that, etc. And this is what he says over here. The Baldas began Petirosis by Moshe given the avodah from Vayal. Since in the day he passed away, his avodah is that he ascends higher. Hat the dribe demel der had the mile from avodah shalom shel Aaron. He realized the quality of Aaron. By the way, he mentioned previously in the Sikha that one of the limitations of Moshe's derech of emes is that he wouldn't be able to bring peace in such a situation. In other words, there were certain situations that Aaron's method would be the only one that would really bring the salvation and the benefit and the solution, because he was able to be mutar l'shanis. But Moshe Rabbeinu that wasn't able to do that because it wasn't his avodah. Therefore, that means in certain situations Moshe couldn't bring the solution. And now I'm just going to read the end of the Sikha over here. This is all how we see the true Avos Yisrael of Moshe Rabbeinu. That what? That he's telling us this message in the Pesukim v'Sereden wegen seines Talkos, in the verses that speak about his passing, is Omer mipti atzmai beruch hakodesh. These words are coming from himself, and his madgish malose shel Aaron. He tells us the quality of Aaron. Kedei as Eden soll von uplearn, in order that we should learn from this. Wie breit and tiefes muss sein der Inyan von Avos Yisrael, how broad and deep the concept of Avos Yisrael has to be, as nit gucken dicke von Gedel ili von sein Avos Yisrael, that besides for the fact, in other words, even though Moshe Rabbeinu was the ultimate person of Avos Yisrael, overriding that, was sicher that the Eile gewinnt meilen bekritisch Meshach chayiv mit Dagel Dargens and Avos Yisrael, who Moshe Rabbeinu definitely throughout his lifetime was constantly reaching higher levels of Avos Yisrael. And as we explained in the beginning of this year, the different ways of Moshe Rabbeinu's Avos Yisrael was the ultimate. Afal Pikein, if das nit maspik, whatever Moshe Rabbeinu's level in Avos Yisrael is, it's not enough. And we must conduct ourselves like Aaron. Reidiv Shalom, V'Neisen Shalom, B'Nishla Riyu, B'Nishla Baila. And that's how the Rebbe finishes the Sikha. So this is wow, 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 wow. I think to myself, the only reason why the Rebbe could come up with this explanation is because this is what the Rebbe would... the Rebbe's learning pshat, that this is what's going on in Moshe Rabbeinu's head on the day of his passing. How does the Rebbe know what Moshe Rabbeinu was thinking about? Because that's the way the Rebbe would think. And the Rebbe says black and white, a sikha, that Aaron's way is the way. So, this is what I meant when I said in the beginning that sometimes the Rebbe says something where you have a source where it's the final word, case closed. You can't get a better proof than Moshe Rabbeinu himself, according to the Rebbe over here, letting us know in the greatest day of his life, where he reaches Vayal, that Chesed is more important than Emes. And what does that tell us concerning our resolution that we have to make in Avos Yisrael? How is this connected to Simchas Torah? So the Rebbe says in the Sikha Chelik Tes Bracha, it's a very, very long Sikha and it's a very deep Sikha, but the Rebbe explains that there's the three levels. There's Sukkos, which was brought about, brings out Avos Yisrael and unification. And Sukkos is called the level of Makif HaKorev. Then comes Shmini Atzeres, which is Makif HaRochik. And then comes Simchas Torah, which is Makif Be'etzem. So Makif means an all-encompassing infinite light. Sukkos was surrounded by the Sukkah from all sides, and as mentioned many times, Ruim Kol Yisrael Leisha B'Sukkah Achas. So Sukkos represents how all the Jews are united, because everyone could sit together. There's room for everybody. And it doesn't make a difference what type of Jew you are. And I don't want to get into it now, but if we look at the Chassidus, talking about the whole of Tishrei, we have the Achdus from Rosh Hashanah, and then comes the Achdus of Yom Kippur, which is not as great as the Achdus of Sukkot. Okay, we can't get into everything now, it's already late. But now in this Sikh and Chelik Tes, the Rebbe is explaining how the Achdus of Shmini Atzeres and the Achdus of Simchas Torah is even greater than the Achdus of Sukkot and the Daled Minim. And how he explains Shmini Atzeres, because there was Par Echad, we brought one korban and it represents the essence of every Yid, the Yechidah. But then, and I want to mention Simchas Torah today, he says that the Simcha of Simchas Torah is even greater. Why? Because in Simchas Torah, the Simcha is in two ways. There's the Simcha of dancing. We dance in a circle. A circle represents everyone is equal. And as the Rebbe said, the Godel Shebekdolim Bizdem Kotn Shebektanim tanzen zusammen. When we see Yidden dancing, we don't distinguish between the rabbi, the layman, the plumber, the electrician, whoever it is, the Torah sage. Everyone equally is dancing around and around. And as explained also in Chesed, the second point is that in Simchas Torah we celebrate the Torah as the Torah is covered. We don't celebrate Simchas Torah by learning, studying. We celebrate Simchas Torah by dancing around the Torah, and it's connected to the holiness of Torah, not the intellect and the knowledge of Torah. So therefore the unification, the Achdus of Yidden that is accomplished in Simchas Torah is even greater than Sukkot and Shmini Atzeres, because Shmini Atzeres is connected to Sukkot, and Sukkot, it says, is that when you celebrate Sukkot, you have to have the level of Leman Yedu Deir Seichem, which means that we bring down the Makif and the Primus and Das, so that means it's still connected to some level of intellect. and a level of understanding. But by dancing, we transcend completely the idea of intellect, anything connected to intellect. So therefore, we get to the real essence, and makif be'etzem, the highest level of makif, which makif in general is an equalizer. So the ultimate, greatest equalizer that makes everyone united is the joy of Simchas Torah. And as we see, b'muchash, that when you come into shul and Simchas Torah, and you see the unity, how everyone's dancing together with love, and everyone's smiling to each other and happy, it's a greater unification than we see in any other days of Sukkot. So in other words, the ultimate idea of Jewish Avas Yisrael and Nachtas Yisrael is in Chag HaSukkos. So we started today with Hareini Mekabel Alai Mitzasei Shel V'Ahavta L'Reach Kamocha. Simchas Torah is the last Yom Tiv connected to this whole month, Chodesh Hashvi, Shemuzba M'moyedim, that's filled with holidays. So let us focus on the most important mitzvah, which is Avos Yisrael, and we should realize and think about this idea, how the concept and the theme in the mitzvah of Avos Yisrael becomes greater and greater, from Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur to Sukkot to Shmini Atzeres, till we come to the climax of Simchas Torah. And think about what we're reading in Pasha HaBeracha. Moshe Rabbeinu himself tells us that Aaron's way is greater, Chesed, and we have to think how this translates into our daily life for the rest of the year. And I can promise you that if you will take this resolution today, this Simchas Torah, that this entire year we should work on and develop and improve from day by day in our Avos Yisrael, I can guarantee you that this year is going to be a much, much better year for you in all areas of your life. As it says in Ayim Yom, Hab holt ha'yidin v'dreibishte dir holtam, love another, a Jew and the Eibishter will love you. Zayn mekarev ha'yidin v'dreibishte dir mekarev zayn, bring another Yid closer, and the Eibishter will bring you closer to a toiv ha'yidin v'dreibishte dir ha'toivetan. The Eibishter should help that we should all increase in Avos Yisrael, and including myself, and starting for myself, and will be U'Barcheinu Avinu Kulonu Ke'echad, as the Alter Rebbe explains, that we're all ba'achdus, then Hashem will bless us, and we should get the ultimate blessing of Gula Mitzvah Shleima, take it from Yad Mamish. Posting from the Rebbe Shchuna, seid alle gesund, gut Shabbos und gut Yontif.